The Indiana Fever dropped ticket prices to $5. $5. You can't get a coffee in most places these days for $5, but you can watch one of the best players in basketball history live, and fans still didn't fill the building. That's not apathy. That's a message. Caitlin Clark dropped 5 three-pointers in the fourth quarter alone on May 15th, forced overtime with a buzzer-beating 3, and the seats were still empty. When fans stop showing up even at rock-bottom prices, something is badly broken inside that organization, and it starts with the coach and the front office. What do you think of Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever front office? Let me know down in the comments below.
Even with ticket prices being somewhat close to the price of a gallon of gas, the Indiana Felines still failed to sell out their game last night against the Washington Mythicals.
Gainbridge Fieldhouse holds just over 17,000 people, and on May 15th, nearly 2,000 of those seats sat empty. The Fever didn't just let that happen quietly. They dropped resale tickets to $5, threw in free hot dogs, cut the price on t-shirts from $40 down to $24, and fans still didn't show up. That's not a slow news day or a scheduling conflict. That's the market telling you something is wrong.
With star power like that, it is absolutely perplexing why the Fever couldn't sell tickets last night. Take a look at this. These were the available seats about 90 minutes before the game started. As you can see, thousands of seats were still available. Once the game started, nearly 2,000 seats remained unsold.
To understand how bad that number actually is, you need to remember what 2024 looked like. When Clark got drafted, Gainbridge turned into one of the hardest tickets in women's basketball. The Fever sold out or near sold out basically every home game that season, and the few times they fell short, it was by a couple hundred tickets, not 2,000. Fans drove in from hours away. Resale prices on the secondary market ran way above face value. The energy in that building was different from anything the WNBA had seen in years, and it held through to 2025, even when Clark was out injured. So when the Fever slashed prices to $5 a few days ago and still couldn't fill the place, that's the contrast you need to sit with. Clark didn't have a quiet night against Washington. She dropped 5 three-pointers in the fourth quarter and then hit a buzzer beater to force overtime, and the building still had 2,000 empty seats. That's not a Clark problem. Fans aren't done with Clark. The TV numbers and the streaming numbers and the clip engagement on social media all say the same thing. People are watching Caitlin Clark more than ever. They're just watching from their couches instead of from section 114.
People are showing their frustration with their wallets. Caitlin Clark, crazy motion. 110,000 views on the Washington Mystics Indiana Fever highlight on their YouTube, on the WNBA YouTube channel. When you put it next to everything else, yikes. Nobody. The rest of the league is like damn near anonymous compared to Caitlin Clark, especially with Caitlin Clark having a great day like that.
That gap between viewership and attendance is what the Fever front office should actually be losing sleep over, because it tells you exactly what's happening. Fans aren't tuning out. They're tuning in, but they're refusing to spend money on a product they've lost faith in. And that's a completely different problem than a team that nobody cares about. When a team drops to $5 a ticket, they're not running a promotion. They're admitting that organic demand has collapsed, and for a franchise built around one of the most marketable athletes in women's sports history, that collapse lands directly at the feet of the front office and the coaching staff. The anger in the fan base didn't show up out of nowhere on May 15th. It built through the offseason, through free agency, through the moment fans started looking at the roster and realizing that Amber Cox hadn't actually fixed the things that needed fixing.
Stephanie White, you got to get it together, man. You got to get it together. I've said this numerous times. If this team came out slow out the gate, it's going to be bad news bears. And they are slow out the gate. And you're seeing the reactions from fans. It is bad news bears.
You can scroll past a critical tweet. You can ignore the comment section. What you cannot ignore is a third of your building sitting empty when you've priced tickets lower than a fast food combo meal. And the specific reasons why fans stopped coming started taking shape long before tip-off against Washington. Washington scored 58 points in the paint against the Fever on May 15th, compared to Indiana's 28. That's a 30-point differential inside, and if you want to understand how that number happened, you need to know what the Fever's front court looked like with 2 minutes and 1 second left in the third quarter, which is when Aaliyah Boston grabbed her lower leg and walked to the bench and didn't come back.
Monique, they had 58 points in the paint, start of overtime, Washington scoring down there over and over again. What did you feel like were the struggles you guys had protecting the cup tonight?
Just executing our coverages at times. Our communication wasn't always there. And again, they just made really tough shots sometimes. There were bodies there, and they just made really, really tough shots. Great players in the post.
Boston is the one player on this roster who makes the interior defense function. She rotates, she contests. She's the reason teams can't just set up shop in the paint against Indiana all night. Without her, the Fever don't have a real plan B, and that's not because of anything that happened during the game. That's because Amber Cox didn't build one in the offseason.
She felt like they were over-dribbling. They need to be a little bit more mindful of where their shooters are. And also defensively, Steph White has been saying it all game.
McMahon drives by Clark. Irvin hangs and finishes. 3 accounts here today. Austin now 5 of 6 from the line, but Citron pulls down the offensive rebound. Iriafen going right back to work.
Kiki Iriafen finished with 25 points and 13 rebounds. Shakira Austin scored 19. Sonia Citron dropped 30 on her own. One analyst watching the game put it simply: Iriafen was just too big for whoever the Fever put in front of her.
Iriafen on Billings. Iriafen spins, fires, and the bank shot goes down. Themselves, players just kind of collide off of them. I'm not sure if that's what happened there or not, as Iriafen strokes a 3. Drives on Citron. Clark up and under, blocked by Iriafen.
After Boston went down, those options were Monique Billings and Maisha Hines-Allen. And against a Washington front court running post-action after post-action, that matchup was over before it started. Washington's coaching staff didn't need to draw up anything clever. They watched film, saw that Indiana had no reliable rim protector behind Boston, and ran the same plays over and over because nothing in the Fever's roster was going to stop them. Cox had a full offseason to address this. Free agents were available who could protect the rim and hold up against physical bigs. Overseas players were worth scouting. What the Fever actually spent money on was Kelsey Mitchell's contract extension, and the front court depth going into 2026 looked almost identical to the front court depth that already worried people in 2025. Boston's presence papered over that problem when she was healthy, so it didn't blow up immediately, but it was always sitting there waiting.
Caitlin Clark is a game changer. The question is, why are the Felines struggling to sell tickets at home? And look, I don't want to over-dramatize it. There were still 15,000 people in the arena last night. Less than 2,000 tickets were unsold. But there is definitely something different this season with the Caitlin Clark fan base. There's a lot of animosity. I see a lot of fans complaining about the Fever as an organization.
Clark's defensive limitations in the paint aren't a secret, and they're not a criticism either. She's a guard. You don't ask a guard to stop Iriafen in the post. You build a roster with bigs who can do that job, and right now the Fever roster doesn't have those bigs. The marketing around Stephanie White this offseason leaned heavily into words like culture and system and leadership. And meanwhile, the actual roster was walking into the season 1 Boston injury away from getting carved up inside by any team with legitimate size. Boston's injury didn't create this problem. It just stopped hiding it. And when fans watched Washington feast inside for 40-plus minutes, Amber Cox's free agency decisions played out right there in real time on the floor.
We have not seen Aaliyah Boston here in a little bit. Clark thought about the 3, circles around, fires away, and hits! Will it be Mitchell? Will it be Clark? Cunningham looking, versus Hines-Allen, handoff Clark for the tie, yes! Caitlin Clark has tied the game with under 2 seconds left to play!
Indiana was down 14 points in the fourth quarter, and Clark dragged the Fever back into that game by herself. 5 3-pointers in the fourth quarter, and then with 3.1 seconds left in regulation, Lexi Hull set a screen, Maisha Hines-Allen caught and handed off, and Clark got the ball exactly where she needed it and buried a three to tie it and send it to overtime. The play worked perfectly. The building went sideways, and then overtime started, and Stephanie White went right back to giving the ball to Kelsey Mitchell. Mitchell finished with 24 points on 10 of 25 shooting, 0 assists, 0 rebounds, and that shot selection in late-game situations is the part that keeps coming up because it keeps mattering. Contested mid-range attempts with the shot clock running down, while Clark stands on the perimeter having the best offensive night anyone in that building had all game, that's the pattern fans are watching play out over and over this season. Clark's fourth quarter and overtime efficiency this season runs well above Mitchell's in the same situations, and none of that is a secret to anyone watching the numbers. After the loss, White described Mitchell's performance as speechless, really, and said she put us on her back, made big shot after big shot, big play after big play, she willed us. That's what White said about a player who shot 10 of 25 and grabbed 0 rebounds. Clark personally erased a 14-point deficit and hit the shot that kept the Fever's season from ending right there in regulation, and the post-game framing from White treated Mitchell as the engine of the whole night. Fans didn't miss that. White's offensive philosophy runs toward ball movement and multiple creators sharing the load, and that works fine with the right roster. The problem is Clark doesn't need a multi-creator system to thrive. She needs pace, pick-and-roll freedom, and the ball in her hands when the game is on the line, and White's system keeps pulling that away from her, even when she's the hottest player on the floor. A coach who genuinely believes in distributing credit is one thing, but when that philosophy shows up in late-game play calls that route the ball away from Clark in overtime, it stops being a philosophy and starts being a problem with direct consequences on the scoreboard. Fans aren't angry at Mitchell. Mitchell can play, and on a different team with a different role, she's a real asset. The anger lands on White because White is the one drawing up the plays. White is the one giving the post-game press conference, and White is the one who watched Clark single-handedly claw back 14 points and then designed an overtime possession that ended with a contested Mitchell shot while Clark watched from the perimeter. Clark is averaging MVP numbers right now, coming off an injury year, and the fan base is bigger and louder than it's ever been. That part isn't broken. What's broken is the organization around her, and fans know it, which is why they're watching on TV instead of buying tickets. Let's talk about what actually needs to change because it's not abstract. The Fever need a rim protector, not a backup big who can log 12 minutes, but a real one. Someone who can stand in front of Shakira Austin or Kiki Iriafen and not get walked into the paint all night. Boston is one of the best players on this roster, and she still can't be the only answer to that problem. One lower leg injury in the third quarter and the whole interior collapses. Cox needs to treat that as an emergency in the next free agency window. Not a preference, not a nice-to-have, an emergency. The coaching question doesn't have a clean answer, and anyone who says it does is being lazy about it. Firing White mid-season doesn't fix the front court, doesn't change the roster, doesn't put a rim protector on the floor. You'd still lose 58 points in the paint against any team with size. So it's not as simple as cutting White loose and watching everything get better overnight, but keeping White in place with zero accountability for the late-game decision-making, and the system mismatch doesn't fix anything either. And right now, there's no public sign that anyone inside the Fever organization is treating those patterns as a problem worth addressing out loud. What fans are asking for isn't complicated. They want Cox to stop pretending the front court depth is fine. They want Clark running the offense in crunch time without a play call routing the ball somewhere else. And they want someone inside that organization to stand up and say plainly that the current setup has real problems. None of that requires blowing up the roster or firing everyone. It requires honesty, and right now the Fever aren't giving fans much of that. The window is real, though. Clark at full health with a full season, Boston back in the paint and healthy, one legitimate rim protector added in free agency, and a system that actually fits the players on the floor instead of the players White might want to coach someday. That roster competes. Aaliyah Boston anchoring the defense with real backup behind her, Clark running pick and roll with pace and freedom, Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull doing what they do on the perimeter. That's a team that can go deep in the playoffs and nobody would be surprised. But none of that happens automatically. The future version of this team looks exactly like the 2026 version if Cox spends another offseason treating front court depth as someone else's problem, and White spends another season designing overtime possessions that end with contested Mitchell jumpers while Clark stands open on the wing. Fans aren't staying home because they stopped believing in Clark. They're staying home because they believe in her enough to refuse to pay money to watch the organization squander what she's giving them every single night she steps on that floor. What do you think of Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever front office? Let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss out. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next one.